So, Nick, let's have a look at ideation now. I wrote down a list of what ideation involves. It's a whole bunch of things, including coming up with lots of possibilities, being flexible with ideas and organising them in new ways, challenging assumptions to come up with unexpected results, solving the problem in little bits rather than all at once. A good way to do this is by breaking the problem into smaller chunks that you can put together in unexpected combinations. Putting things together randomly to make connections that you might not have seen before. Using intuition and giving yourself plenty of time to solve the problem. Not worrying about taking risks and making mistakes, it all helps. Collaborating in groups to let you react to each other's ideas. Exploring the problem in a variety of ways and using different senses to find different solutions. Using analogies and metaphors to make valuable associations. Cross-referencing items either randomly or using a system to generate new possibilities. And being confident in exploring ideas even when the outcome isn't clear. And don't get stuck with the idea that there's only one right answer to the problem.
Whoa, that's a pretty long list, Sue. Maybe we could sum it up briefly. How about, to generate effective ideas, you should come up with a lot of concepts, think about them in different ways, and experiment with them, without fear of failure or thinking that there's only one right answer. Yeah, I guess in a sense it's all about being prepared to go into uncharted waters and take risks to arrive at novel possibilities.
I think that's spot on, Nick.
Okay, well I guess there's some sort of system behind all this.
Ah, yes, well, that's where creative problem solving and the systems approach to creativity comes in.
Hey, this sounds useful. Tell me more about the process.
Well, first of all, think of creative problem solving as having 5 main stages.
Uh-huh.
In stage 1, you think about the big picture. You need to identify the problem to solve, formulate a question to guide the rest of your journey, and then reflect on your progress.
That makes sense. So, for that assignment that you were worried about last week, what was the big picture for that?
Well, our assignment is to write a report on a research question we create that's related to a current and controversial microbiology issue. I have to show that I can use databases and other sources of info to identify topical issues, present a balanced argument, and cite evidence to support my position on the chosen issue.
Oh, yeah, well I can see why you were stumped for ideas. That sounds like a pretty broad topic. I'll bet there's a lot of controversial issues to explore.
Yeah, that's why I was so stressed last week. But your pep talk on creative thinking, plus my own research on creativity theories, helped me understand the relationship between creativity and research, and how we apply the skills of creative problem solving in pretty much everything we do. Well, at least we should use creative problem solving to find novel solutions. I don't think I've actually thought about the process before, though.
Cool. Well, I'm glad I could help. So, first of all, you looked at the big picture, i.e. the overall assignment, to better understand what you needed to do. Then you formulated a question to guide your approach, and then also reflected on how you were going. So what is your research question?
Well, by looking at the big picture, I came up with a topic for my research question. I wanted to look at food allergies and how it might be possible to reduce how severe they are by having the allergic person eat really small amounts of what they're allergic to.
Oh, I see. So a bit like how vaccinations work, right?
Well, it's a bit like that. Vaccination is basically the administration of a vaccine to enable the person to develop immunity to a pathogen. But while lots of people think the vaccine is just a weakened form of the pathogen, that's not quite accurate enough. There's actually a whole lot more that can be going on with the pathogen in the vaccine. But let's get back to the research topic.
Okay. How did you come up with that topic anyway?
I read about the possibility of feeding really small amounts of peanut protein to kids with severe peanut allergies to hopefully reduce their allergy over time. So that sounded pretty controversial. I mean, these allergies are really bad. People can die from them, so it sounded pretty risky. So that was my starting point, and then I started my research. I found a recent article in a pretty reputable journal about a study where researchers found that peanut oral immunotherapy, which is just a complicated way of saying what I was just talking about, reduced the allergy in most children in the study. So the study indicates that it works. But it's generated a lot of debate. So I thought, why not use that to look at the possibility of that type of treatment for other kinds of food allergies too?
Oh, okay, so that's the topic for your research, but what is your actual question?
My research question is, can oral immunotherapy desensitize children to food allergies?
Okay, so how are you going with answering that question?
Well, I moved on to the second stage of the creative problem-solving process, which is generating ideas. I used mind mapping and brainstormed my own ideas about the issue. I also tried to challenge all my assumptions about food allergies, who's affected by them, what causes them, and how they're treated. I guess that's how those researchers came up with their treatment method, by challenging their assumptions about the traditional approach to allergies, which was for people with food allergies to completely avoid the food they're allergic to. Generating ideas helped me to come up with keywords that I used to search for and find references for my assignment.
Okay, so you're saying that mind mapping helped with divergent thinking.
Absolutely.
But what about convergent thinking?
Okay, so that's where stage 3 of the creative problem-solving process comes in. It's all about investigating what others know. It's the research phase, where you start really broad, exploring all the info you can find, and then you start to narrow down the focus to one particular aspect of the issue or problem.
Yeah, actually, that's how I usually go about finding references for my assignments too.
So then it's stage 4, and after writing up the different views I found based on the evidence in my reference material, I asked myself if the problem was solved.
And was it?
Well, by stage 4 I was pretty close to having met all the assessment criteria, but I still had a little way to go before I could answer the research question itself. The assignment details and the first 4 stages of the creative problem-solving process really guided me and helped me identify the topic, challenge my assumptions to think more creatively about the problem, and then I found it easy to do my research.
But hang on, you said that the creative problem-solving process had 5 stages. What's the 5th stage?
I'm glad you asked, Nick. Stage 5 is actually a really cool part of the process. It's where we ask, what's new about the idea? Which is a very interesting question to ask after doing so much work. And by asking myself this, I came up with a far more original report, because I was able to explain that my research either supported or challenged the study's claims, and I was also able to come up with new ways of thinking about the problem and even propose new areas of research.
That's pretty impressive, Sue. So, I guess what it all boils down to is that we need to think about things in different ways if we want to come up with creative and innovative results.
That's exactly right, Nick.
Well, thanks for explaining the creative problem-solving process to me, Sue. You know, I can see how it could apply to lots of different kind of assignments. Maybe even in our careers once we graduate.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, I gotta get to my next lecture now. See you later.
Bye, Nick.
Sue has just outlined the process she undertook to approach her assignment using creative problem solving. Now think about a particular assignment or task that you have undertaken in the past and consider whether you applied a similar process to address the problem. If not, what strategies did you apply to solve the problem? Were they effective? Could creative problem solving have assisted in meeting the demands of the assignment or task?